They called her a waste of space, a genetic dead end. For 22 years, Tiffany Anderson was the punching bag of the Silver Creek pack, the girl who couldn't shift the omega, who scrubbed floors while others hunted. Her own alpha told her she would die alone. But they didn't know that silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's just the calm before a catastrophe. When the Alpha King, a man who had slaughtered thousands, walked into that ballroom, he didn't look at the beauty queens. He looked at the girl covered in wine and ash. And when she finally broke, the wolf that crawled out of her skin didn't howl at the moon. It made the moon tremble. This is the story of the White Cataclysm. The scars on Tiffany Anderson's back were a road map of her life in the Silver Creek pack, but the one that hurt the most wasn't physical. It was the silence in her head. At 22, Tiffany was a medical anomaly. In a world where lycanthropy was the governing law of nature, failing to shift by your 16th birthday was a social death sentence. Failing to shift by 20 meant you were considered hollow, a human in wolf's clothing, a burden to the pack's resources. You missed a spot, Hollow. Tiffany didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the cracked linoleum of the pack house kitchen, her hands raw from the bleach water. She knew that voice. It was Lydia Sterling, the Alpha's daughter, and the future Luna of Silver Creek. Lydia kicked the bucket of dirty water over. Grey sludge spread across the floor. Tiffany had just spent an hour scrubbing. "Oops," Lydia said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. She was holding a glass of iced latte, dressed in designer athleisure wear, that cost more than Tiffany's entire existence. "Clean it up. Father is hosting the regional alpha tonight before we leave for the summit. If this floor isn't spotless, you're sleeping in the kennel again." Tiffany gripped the rag until her knuckles turned white. "Yes, Lydia." "That's future Luna to you." Lydia stepped forward, her heel grinding into Tiffany's fingers. Tiffany bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. She couldn't fight back. Alpha Gabriel Sterling. A man with a heavy hand and a heart of coal had made Tiffany's status very clear after her parents died in a rogue attack 10 years ago. Without a wolf to defend her, she was property. A servant kept around only because the pack laws forbade killing pack members without cause. But lately, the atmosphere in Silver Creek had shifted. It wasn't just the usual cruelty. It was tense, desperate. The summit, Lydia mentioned, was the topic of every whisper in the hallways. The Wolf King Alaric Thorn had summoned every alpha in the Northern Hemisphere to the Grand Aspen Lodge in Colorado. Alaric Thorn. The name alone made seasoned alphas sweat. He was the primal, the only wolf in existence with blood from the first lineage. Rumors said he was 7 feet tall, that his wolf was the size of a grizzly bear, and that he was looking for a mate. But not just any mate, he was looking for a weapon. A war was brewing on the southern borders with the Rogue Coalition, and the king needed a queen who could stand in the blood with him. Tiffany knew she had no place in that world. She was just trying to survive the afternoon. "Lydia!" Alpha Gabriel's voice boomed from the hallway. "Leave the runt. We need to pack." Lydia sneered, lifting her foot off Tiffany's crushed hand. "You're lucky, Hollow. Try not to die while we're gone, although it would save us on the grocery bill." She sauntered away. Tiffany exhaled a shaky, rattling breath. She looked at her hand. It was bruising rapidly, the skin broken. As she reached for the bucket, a strange sensation washed over her. It wasn't the usual ache of her body. It was a heat deep in the marrow of her bones. It felt like a fever, spiking, sudden and sharp, located right in the center of her chest. Thump! Her heart skipped a beat. For a split second, the kitchen smelled different. Usually it smelled of industrial cleaner and stale grease. But for 1 second, Tiffany smelled snow. Fresh, biting, impossible snow mixed with the scent of burning cedar. She shook her head, dizzy. "I'm just tired," she told herself. "I'm dehydrated and tired." Tiffany, the cook. Mrs. Higgins, a kindly human woman, who was the only person who looked at Tiffany with pity, bustled in. "Oh, honey, look at this mess. Listen, Alpha Gabriel wants you upstairs." Tiffany froze. "Upstairs, I'm not allowed on the 2nd floor. He sent the beta down. You're going to the summit." Tiffany blinked. "What?" "Apparently the king's decree was specific," Mrs. Higgins whispered, looking around fearfully. "Every unmated female between 18 and 25. No exceptions. Even the latent ones." A cold pit formed in Tiffany's stomach. This wasn't an invitation. It was a humiliating display. Alpha Gabriel would have to present his defective pack member to the king. He would be furious. Tiffany stood up, wiping her hands on her stained apron. "He's going to kill me," she whispered. "Just keep your head down." Mrs. Higgins pressed a small bundle into Tiffany's hands, a hidden stash of granola bars. "Stay invisible. You're good at that." Tiffany walked up the grand staircase, her legs feeling like lead. She was about to enter the lion's den. But that scent, the snow and cedar, lingered in her nose ghostly and faint. She didn't know it yet, but the dormancy was ending. The thing inside her wasn't dead. It was just waiting for a challenger. The Grand Aspen Lodge was less of a hotel and more of a fortress carved into the side of the Rocky Mountains. It was neutral territory, heavily guarded by the king's elite enforcers' wolves, who wore tactical gear and carried assault rifles loaded with silver nitrate bullets. The driveway was a parade of wealth. Rolls-Royces, armored SUVs and limousines deposited alphas and their families from all over the continent. The air vibrated with pheromones. It was suffocating. Hundreds of wolves, all posturing, all releasing dominance waves to test the waters. For Tiffany, it was physical torture. Because she was hollow, she had zero natural shielding. The dominance auras of the visiting alphas hit her like physical slaps. She sat in the back of the Silver Creek van, the equipment van, not the luxury SUV Lydia rode in, crammed between suitcases. When the van stopped, Beta Miller yanked the door open. "Get the bags, Anderson, and don't make eye contact with anyone. You're an embarrassment enough as it is." Tiffany stepped out into the biting Colorado air. She wore a faded gray hoodie and jeans that were too short, a stark contrast to the silk gowns and tailored suits surrounding her. She grabbed 2 heavy suitcases struggling under the weight. "Look at that," a voice snickered nearby. Tiffany kept her head down, but she could see them. A group of she-wolves from the Crimson Tide Pack. They were stunning, tall, athletic, glowing with health. "Is that a servant?" one asked. "No, I can smell it. She's Pack, Silver Creek. But she smells empty, like dust." Tiffany focused on her boots, left foot, right foot. Just get to the room. The heat in her chest returned. It was stronger now. The scent of snow and cedar was no longer a ghost. It was cutting through the heavy musk of the other wolves. It made her dizzy. The heavy suitcases felt suddenly light, as if gravity had momentarily forgotten her. She shook the feeling off and trudged into the grand hall. The lobby was a cathedral of timber and glass. In the center, A massive chandelier made of antlers cast a golden glow over the crowd. At the far end, a dais was set up. "Silver Creek," the announcer boomed. Alpha Gabriel Sterling strode in, Lydia on his arm. Lydia looked magnificent in a red velvet dress, her hair cascading in perfect waves. They looked like royalty. Tiffany followed 20 paces behind, dragging the luggage, trying to hug the wall. "Gabriel," a deep voice rumbled. Alpha Gabriel stopped. Standing near the reception desk was Alpha Marcus of the Black River Pack, an old rival. "Marcus?" Gabriel nodded stiffly. "I see you brought the charity case." Marcus laughed, gesturing loudly at Tiffany. The noise in the lobby died down. Everyone looked. "Is it true, Gabriel? She's 22 and hasn't popped a claw. Why do you feed it?" Tiffany froze. The humiliation burned her cheeks. Gabriel's face turned purple. He hated his reputation being tarnished. He turned on Tiffany, his eyes flashing yellow. "I told you to use the service entrance," Gabriel roared, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. The beta told me to carry the bags." Tiffany stammered, her voice small. "Silence!" Gabriel marched over to her. The crowd watched with bated breath. Cruelty was common, but public discipline at the King's Summit was risky. Gabriel didn't care. He backhanded Tiffany across the face. The sound was like a gunshot. Tiffany fell backward, crashing into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. Glass shattered. Wine soaked her grey hoodie. She lay amidst the shards, blood trickling from her lip. "You are a stain on my name," Gabriel hissed, looming over her. "As of this moment, you are stripped of the pack name. You are rogue. Get out of my sight before I finish what nature started." Rejection. It usually required a ceremony, but an alpha's word in front of witnesses was binding. The severance of the pack link was supposed to be agonizing, a mental tearing of the soul. Tiffany braced for the pain, but it didn't come. Instead, the burning in her chest exploded. The link to Silver Creek didn't tear. It simply dissolved. It fell away like a cobweb, insignificant. And then the doors to the grand hall slammed open. The wind howled outside, blowing snow into the lobby. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in a second. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. A man walked through the doors. He was massive, easily 6'6", wearing a black tactical suit that strained against broad shoulders. His hair was black as pitch, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that froze the room. They were violet, glowing electric violet. King Alaric Thorn. He didn't look at Alpha Gabriel. He didn't look at the beautiful Lydia, who was frantically trying to pose. He stopped in the center of the room. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. A low growl started in his chest. A sound so deep it vibrated the floorboards under Tiffany's hands. His head snapped toward the corner where Tiffany lay in the broken glass and spilled wine. The king moved. He didn't walk. He blurred. In a heartbeat, he was standing over Alpha Gabriel. He shoved the Alpha aside as if he were a rag doll. Gabriel flew 10 feet and hit a pillar. Alaric stood over Tiffany. The entire room gasped. Was he going to kill the intruder? The rogue, Tiffany looked up, terrified. Her brown eyes met his violet ones. The world stopped. Alaric fell to his knees. He didn't care about the glass. He didn't care about the wine. He reached out a trembling hand toward her face. "Mine," he whispered, his voice rough with a savagery that made the alphas in the room tremble. "You are impossible." Tiffany flinched away, expecting a blow. I'm useless, she whispered, repeating the mantra she'd been taught. I can't shift. I'm hollow. Alaric's eyes narrowed. He looked at the blood on her lip, then at Gabriel recovering against the pillar. The king's face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Hollow! Alaric laughed, a dark, terrifying sound. He looked back at Tiffany. Little one, you aren't hollow. You are overflowing. He touched her skin. Snap! A shockwave of energy blasted out from them, shattering the remaining windows in the lobby. Tiffany screamed as her back arched off the floor. The heat in her chest wasn't a fever anymore. It was a fire. Let it out, Alaric commanded, his voice echoing with the power of the primal. Show them what you are. Tiffany's eyes rolled back. Her bones began to crack. But this wasn't a normal shift. This wasn't the biological rearranging of a wolf. Light, pure, blinding white light erupted from her skin. The shadows in the room stretched and screamed. The ground shook. Impossible, Alpha Marcus whispered from the crowd. Tiffany's scream turned into a roar. Not a bark, a roar, and from the blinding light, a creature stepped forward. It was massive, larger than Alaric. Its fur was not just white. It was translucent, shimmering like starlight. It had 3 tails that whipped the air, and its eyes were not animalistic. They were ancient. Tiffany had shifted. She wasn't a wolf. She was a spirit walker, a legend that hadn't been seen since the first era. And she was looking right at Alpha Gabriel. The silence in the grand hall of the Aspen Lodge was heavier than the timber beams holding up the roof. The creature standing where Tiffany Anderson had been was a terrifying masterpiece of nature. She was colossal. Her shoulder blades brushed the bottom of the ruined chandelier. But it was the nature of the beast that froze the blood of every alpha in the room. Wolves were creatures of earth and muscle. This was a creature of the ether. Her fur was white, but not like snow. It was like the center of a burning flame, white-hot and shimmering. Where she stepped, the marble floor didn't just crack. It blackened, scorched by a celestial heat radiating from her pores. 3 magnificent tails swayed behind her each movement, leaving a trail of silver mist in the air. And the eyes. They weren't the yellow of a beta or the red of an alpha. They were pools of liquid silver, ancient and devoid of mercy. Alpha Gabriel Sterling was trembling. He was a man who ruled by fear, but he was looking at something that ate fear. He scrambled backward, his boots slipping on the champagne-soaked floor. "What is that?" Lydia shrieked, her voice cracking the unnatural silence. "Father, kill it! It's a monster!" The spirit walker turned her massive head toward Lydia. The movement was fluid, like water flowing uphill. A low sound vibrated from the creature's chest, not a growl but a hum. It sounded like a choir singing in a crypt. Crack! The spirit walker didn't attack. She simply stomped one massive paw. The force of it sent a shock wave rippling through the floor. Lydia was knocked off her feet, her designer dress tearing as she slid across the debris. King Alaric Thorne stood his ground. He was the only one who hadn't moved. He stood directly in front of the beast, his hands open, palms up. He wasn't challenging her. He was worshipping her. "Beautiful," Alaric murmured, his violet eyes wide with a mixture of shock and adoration. "A spirit walker. The histories said you were extinct. They said the moon goddess took you back because we were unworthy. The great beast lowered her head. Her snout, large enough to crush Alaric's skull, hovered inches from his face. She sniffed him. The scent of cedar and snow overwhelmed the creature. It was the anchor, the tether keeping her from dissolving into pure energy. Inside the beast, Tiffany was screaming. What is happening? Why am I so big? Why does everything smell like fear? She was trapped in the passenger seat of her own body. The instinct, the primal spirit, was in control. It wanted blood. It wanted to tear Gabriel Sterling apart for the years of starvation, the beatings, the cold nights in the kennel. The beast lunged toward Gabriel. No. Alaric's voice was like a whip crack. He didn't strike her. He stepped in her path, a suicide move. If she didn't stop, she would trample the king of all wolves. Tiffany, Alaric said, his voice dropping to a soothing baritone. Look at me. The beast snarled, exposing teeth that looked like daggers made of diamond. I know you want to kill him, Alaric said, holding her silver gaze. He deserves it. He deserves worse. But if you kill him now in this form, the council will hunt you. They won't understand what you are. They will call you a demon. The beast hesitated. Her 3 tails lashed impatiently. Let me do it, Alaric vowed, his voice turning dark. I am the king. My justice is law. I promise you, Tiffany. He will never hurt you again, but you must come back to me. Come back to the skin. You are burning too bright. Tiffany felt the truth in his words. She also felt the exhaustion. Channeling this much power was like holding a lightning bolt. It was burning her from the inside out. The light began to fade. It started at her paws, the blinding white dimming to a soft glow. The massive form began to shrink. Bones realigned with sickening crunches that echoed in the silent hall. The fur receded. Alaric moved instantly. He ripped off his heavy tactical jacket. As the blinding light vanished completely, Tiffany collapsed. She was back in her human form, naked, shivering violently, her skin steaming as if she had just stepped out of a boiling spring. Alaric caught her before she hit the glass-strewn floor. He wrapped his jacket around her, cocooning her completely. He lifted her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. My king! Alpha Gabriel stumbled forward, looking manic. He saw the girl in the king's arms and saw a weapon he had foolishly thrown away. Greed replaced his fear. Your Majesty, surely you see, this is a trick. That girl is property of Silver Creek. I demand you return my pack member. Alaric stopped. He didn't turn around. The temperature in the room plummeted until breath misted in the air. Beta Miller, Alaric said. His voice was quiet, deadly calm. From the shadows, the king's head enforcer, a scarred giant named Silas, stepped forward. Yes, sire. Secure the room, Alaric ordered, shifting Tiffany's unconscious form closer to his chest. No one leaves, especially not Alpha Sterling. Alaric turned his head slightly, just enough for Gabriel to see one glowing violet eye. You said she was Rogue Gabriel. You disowned her. You broke the bond. Alaric's smile was terrifying. She is no longer Silver Creek. She is mine, and pray to whatever god you believe in that she survives the night. Because if she dies from the abuse I see written on her skin, I will erase your bloodline from history. Alaric turned and walked toward the elevators, carrying the most dangerous creature on Earth, leaving a room full of powerful alphas, kneeling in the wreckage of their own arrogance. Pain was Tiffany's oldest friend. She knew the sharp stab of a fractured rib, the dull throb of hunger, the sting of a cane. But this pain was different. It felt like her veins had been scrubbed with sandpaper. Every nerve ending was raw, vibrating with a residual hum of electricity. She groaned, trying to shift her weight. "Easy. Don't move." The voice was deep, unfamiliar, and laced with a terrifying amount of authority. Tiffany's eyes flew open. She gasped, scrambling backward, her hands grasping for something to defend herself with. She wasn't in the kennel. She wasn't in the attic. She was in a bed that was larger than her entire room back at Silver Creek. The sheets were silk cool against her feverish skin. The ceiling was high, painted with murals of the night sky. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. And sitting in a velvet armchair by the bed was the king. Alaric Thorne had cleaned up. The tactical gear was gone, replaced by a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and inked with ancient runic tattoos. He held a glass of water in his hand. He looked tired. "Where?" Tiffany's voice was a croak. Her throat felt scorched. "The royal suite," Alaric said softly. He stood up. Tiffany flinched, curling into a ball, pulling the duvet over her head. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin the floor. I'll clean it up, please. Just don't." Silence. Tiffany shook under the blanket, waiting for the blow, waiting for the yell. Stupid, useless Tiffany. Ruining the summit. The mattress dipped. He sat on the edge of the bed. "Tiffany." His voice wasn't angry. It was pained. "Look at me." Slowly trembling, she lowered the duvet. Alaric was looking at her with an expression she had never seen directed at her before. It wasn't pity, she hated pity. It was fury, but it wasn't directed at her. It was a protective, simmering rage. "You are not a servant here," Alaric said, enunciating every word. "You will never clean a floor again. You will never scrub a toilet again. Do you understand?" Tiffany blinked, confused. "But I'm hollow. I'm useless." Alaric set the water down on the nightstand with a heavy thud. He took a deep breath, trying to control his temper. "Give me your hand." Tiffany hesitated, then extended her bruised hand. Her knuckles were still swollen from where Lydia had stepped on them, and her wrist was thin, fragile. Alaric took her hand in his. His palms were calloused and warm, large enough to crush her hand, but he held it like it was made of spun sugar. "You are not hollow," he whispered. "You are a spirit walker. Do you know what that is?" Tiffany shook her head. "Thousands of years ago, before the packs were formed, there were wolves who walked between the physical world and the spirit realm." Alaric explained, his thumb tracing the blue veins in her wrist. "They were the judges, the executioners of the moon goddess. They were so powerful that other alphas feared them, so they hunted them down." He looked into her eyes. "We thought the bloodline was dead, but it was just hiding, waiting for a vessel strong enough to carry it." He squeezed her hand gently. "You didn't shift late because you were weak, Tiffany. You shifted late because your body needed time to build a cage strong enough to hold a nuclear bomb." Tiffany stared at him. It sounded like a fairy tale. "But Gabriel said." "Gabriel is a fool," Alaric growled. The violet light in his eyes flared. "I had the royal healer examine you while you slept. You have 6 healed fractures in your ribs. Your left tibia was broken and set poorly. You are malnourished, dehydrated, and you have silver burns on your back." Tiffany pulled her hand away, shame flooding her cheeks. She didn't want him to know how broken she was. She wanted to hide. "He starved you." Alaric continued, his voice trembling with suppressed violence. "He beat you, and yet you survived. You are the strongest wolf I have ever met." "Why do you care?" Tiffany whispered, a tear leaking from her eye. "I'm nobody. Even if I am this monster, I'm just a girl from Silver Creek." Alaric reached out and wiped the tear from her cheek with his thumb. The spark that jumped between them was undeniable. It wasn't just heat. It was a magnetic pull, a feeling of home. "You aren't a monster," Alaric said, "and you aren't nobody." He leaned in closer. The scent of cedar and snow wrapped around her, making her head spin. "When I walked into that hall, my wolf didn't just see a powerful shifter. He saw the other half of his soul." Tiffany's breath hitched. She knew what he was saying, but she couldn't believe it. Mates were for beautiful, strong wolves like Lydia. Not for her. "I am the Alpha King," Alaric said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. "I have armies. I have wealth. I have power. But until I saw you in that pile of glass, I was alone." He took her hand again and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. Thump, thump, thump. It was beating in perfect rhythm with hers. "You are my mate, Tiffany Anderson, and I am going to burn Silver Creek to the ground for what they did to you." Tiffany felt the truth of the bond snap into place. It was terrifying. She was the mate of the king. But with that realization came a sudden, horrific memory. "The summit," she gasped, sitting up. "Gabriel, he has the legal right. If he challenges the claim, if he says I was never formally released—" "He already tried," Alaric said grimly. Tiffany froze. "What, while you were sleeping, Gabriel filed a petition with the Council of Elders. He claims that since you never shifted before, you are mentally unstable. He claims the beast is a danger to society and must be contained." Alaric's face darkened. "He wants to take you back, Tiffany. He wants to put a collar on you and use you as a weapon for his pack." Panic rose in Tiffany's throat. "You can't let him. He'll put me in the cage. He'll hurt me." "I won't let him take you," Alaric vowed, grabbing her shoulders to steady her. "But the council, they are old-fashioned. They fear what they don't understand, and they are terrified of what you became in that lobby." He looked deep into her eyes. "To keep you, I have to prove you can control it. I have to prove you aren't a monster. There is a trial tomorrow. A trial of spirit." "A trial," Tiffany whispered. "Combat," Alaric said, his eyes hard. "Gabriel has chosen a champion to fight you. If you win, you are free, and you are my queen. If you lose—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. If she lost, she went back to the kennel. Only this time, she wouldn't just be a servant. She would be a lab rat. "I don't know how to fight," Tiffany said, her voice small. "I've never fought anyone. I just scrub floors." Alaric stood up. He looked like a god of war, terrifying and beautiful. "Then I will teach you," he said. "We have 12 hours before the sun rises. You need to learn how to be a killer, Tiffany, because Gabriel didn't pick just anyone to fight you." "Who?" Tiffany asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "He picked the Butcher of the North," Alaric said. "His beta, the man who broke your leg when you were 12. Beta Miller. Tiffany's blood ran cold. Alaric extended his hand. Get up, little wolf. Tonight the victim dies, and the queen is born. The private training dojo beneath the Aspen Lodge was a cavern of concrete and cold steel. There were no windows, only harsh fluorescent lights that hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. The air smelled of stale sweat and old blood, the scent of generations of alphas who had sharpened their claws here. "Again," Alaric commanded. Tiffany lay on the mat, her chest heaving, sweat plastering her hair to her forehead. Her muscles screamed in protest. For 4 hours the king had driven her past the point of exhaustion. I can't," she gasped, rolling onto her side. "Please, my legs won't move." Alaric didn't offer a hand to help her up. He stood 10 feet away, shirtless, his skin glistening. He looked less like a lover and more like a statue carved from war itself. His violet eyes were dim-shadowed by a desperate urgency. "Miller won't stop because you're tired, Tiffany." Alaric said, his voice void of sympathy. "He won't stop because you're crying. He enjoys the crying. It's the seasoning for the meat." Tiffany flinched at the harshness. "I know that. I lived with him for 10 years. "Then stand up," Alaric roared, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls. Tiffany forced herself up. Her knees knocked together. She raised her fists, mimicking the stance he had taught her, but her hands shook uncontrollably. Alaric moved. He didn't shift. He didn't need to. He closed the distance in a blur of speed, sweeping her legs out from under her. Tiffany hit the mat hard, the air driven from her lungs with a wheeze. She lay there, staring at the industrial lights, tears finally spilling over. "I'm not a warrior," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're wasting your time. Just let me run. If I run now, maybe I can disappear before morning." Silence stretched between them. Then the heavy footsteps approached. Alaric knelt beside her. This time the aggression bled out of him, leaving only a raw, terrified vulnerability. "If you run," he said, "Softy Gabriel will hunt you down. And if he doesn't, the council will. You are a spirit walker, Tiffany. You are a threat to the hierarchy just by existing. There is nowhere to hide." He brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered on her cheek, his touch burning. "I am hard on you because I am terrified," he admitted, his voice rough. "I have waited centuries for you. I cannot lose you 6 hours after I found you." Tiffany looked into his eyes. She saw the fear behind the violet fire. The king of wolves, the primal, was afraid. Not for himself, but for her. "I don't know how to access the wolf," Tiffany confessed, sitting up slowly. "In the lobby. It just happened. It was rage. Now I just feel small." Alaric sat back on his heels. "You are trying to fight like an alpha, like me, with brute force. But that isn't who you are." He took her hands. "Think about your life in Silver Creek," he said intently. "How did you survive Lydia? How did you survive Miller's beatings without a wolf to heal you?" Tiffany looked down at her scars. "I stayed quiet. I watched them. I learned to predict them. I knew Lydia was angry by the way she walked. I knew Miller was drunk by the way he opened the door." "Exactly," Alaric whispered. "You survived by seeing what others couldn't. You survived by being a ghost." He stood up and pulled her to her feet. "Don't try to overpower Miller. You can't. He is 7 feet of muscle and sadism. If you trade blows with him, you will die." Alaric stepped behind her, his chest pressing against her back, his arms guiding hers into a new position. Fluid loose, defensive. "The spirit walker is not a creature of earth," he murmured into her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. "It is a creature of the void. Don't block his hits, Tiffany. Be the mist. Let him strike the air. And when he overextends, when he exposes his soul, strike," she finished, feeling the logic of it. "Not at the body," Alaric corrected. "Spirit walkers attack the essence. You don't break his bones. You sever his connection to his wolf." Tiffany froze. To sever a wolf from their human host was a fate worse than death. It was to make them truly hollow. "Can I really do that?" she asked, fear fluttering in her throat. Alaric turned her around, so she faced him. The air between them crackled with the mate bond, an invisible magnetic tether that pulled them together. "You are the judgment of the moon goddess," Alaric said, leaning down until their foreheads touched. "You can do anything." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate tasting of salt and impending violence. It was a promise. "Survive this, and I will give you the world." When they pulled apart, the fear in Tiffany's chest was gone. It was replaced by a cold, quiet resolve. "Teach me," she said. The council arena was an ancient amphitheater, carved into the granite peak of the mountain open to the sky. A blizzard had raged through the night, leaving the stone circle buried under a foot of pristine white snow. The wind bit at Tiffany's exposed skin. She stood in the center of the arena, wearing nothing but a thin white tunic and loose trousers, the traditional garb of the penitent. She was barefoot. The cold numbed her toes, but she welcomed it. It kept her focused. Around the rim of the pit, hundreds of wolves watched. The High Council sat on stone thrones raised above the rest. In the center sat Elder Kalen, a wolf so old his skin looked like parchment. His eyes were milky white, blind, yet he saw everything. To the right, standing in the viewing box of the Silver Creek pack, was Alpha Gabriel. He wore a heavy fur coat and a smug grin. Lydia stood beside him, looking bored, checking her nails. They didn't think Tiffany was a threat. They thought the display in the lobby was a fluke, a momentary burst of accidental magic. "The accused," Elder Kalen's voice scratched through the air, amplified by acoustics carved into the rock. "Tiffany Anderson, rogue, accused of deception and harboring a forbidden spirit." "I am not a rogue," Tiffany called out. Her voice shook slightly, but it was loud. "And I harbor nothing but the truth." "We shall see," Kalen rasped. "The trial is simple. Survival is the only verdict. Bring out the champion." The heavy iron gate at the far end of the arena creaked open. Beta Miller stepped out. He was in his human form, but he was monstrous. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body a map of scar tissue. He carried a heavy iron flail in one hand, though weapons were technically forbidden in a shifting duel. The council said nothing. The game was rigged. Miller grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "Hello, little runt. Did you miss me?" Tiffany didn't answer. She shifted her stance, sliding her right foot back into the snow. "Be the mist." "Begin," Kalen shouted. Miller didn't shift immediately. He wanted to hurt her as a man first. He swung the flail. The spiked iron ball whistled through the air, aiming for her head. Tiffany didn't block. She didn't duck. She flowed. She twisted her torso an inch to the left. The wind of the weapon passed her cheek. Miller stumbled, surprised by the miss. He roared and swung a backhand fist. Tiffany dropped to her knees, sliding on the ice between his legs, and stood up behind him. The crowd murmured. The useless girl was fast. "Stand still," Miller roared. His bones began to crack. He was shifting. It was a gruesome sight. His jaw unhinged, his spine elongated. Within seconds, a massive, mangy grey wolf stood in the snow. It was a war beast, scarred and foaming at the mouth. The wolf lunged. This time, Tiffany couldn't dodge. The sheer size of him was like a falling building. His shoulder slammed into her chest. Tiffany flew backward, hitting the stone wall of the arena with a sickening crunch. Pain exploded in her ribs, the same ribs she had just healed. She slid down into the snow, gasping for air, blood spotting the white ground. Gabriel laughed from the stands. "Finish her, Miller! Rip her throat out!" The grey wolf prowled toward her, growling low. It was playing with its food. Tiffany looked up. Her eyes found Alaric in the royal box. He was gripping the stone railing so hard, the rock was crumbling to dust under his fingers. His face was a mask of torture. He wanted to jump in. He wanted to slaughter everyone. "No," she told him silently. "I have to do this." She looked back at the wolf. Miller was looming over her jaws, opening to crush her skull. "I am not useless," she thought. "I am the ghost." Deep inside her chest, the fire ignited. Not the frantic explosion from the lobby, but a cold blue flame. Miller lunged. Tiffany closed her eyes. Boom! A pillar of silver light erupted from the snow, blasting Miller backward. The spectators shielded their eyes. When the light faded, the spirit walker stood there. She was magnificent, ethereal. Her fur was not solid. It drifted like smoke. Her 3 tails fanned out behind her, glowing with runic symbols. She was smaller than Miller's werewolf, but she felt heavier. The air around her distorted, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate her presence. Miller, recovering from the blast, snarled. He was stupid with bloodlust. He charged. The spirit walker didn't move. She waited until his teeth were inches from her throat. Then she vanished. She didn't run. She blinked out of existence and reappeared instantly on Miller's back. The crowd gasped. Teleportation, a gift not seen in 10,000 years. Tiffany sank her teeth into the back of Miller's neck, but she didn't bite flesh. She bit down into the energy that swirled beneath his skin. She tasted his soul. It was rot and bile. She pulled. Miller screamed a sound that wasn't human or animal. It was the sound of a being torn asunder. With a wet, tearing noise, Tiffany yanked her head back. She didn't rip out his throat. She ripped out a shadow. A dark, translucent shape trailed from her jaws, the essence of Miller's wolf. Miller's physical wolf form convulsed. The fur receded instantly. The muscle shrank. Within seconds, Miller was a human man again lying naked in the snow, curled in a fetal position, sobbing. His eyes were empty. Not dead, but empty. He was hollow. Truly hollow. Tiffany stood over him, the ghostly wolf essence dissolving in her jaws like mist. She looked up at the council. Her silver eyes locked onto Elder Kalen. She threw her head back and let out a roar that shattered the icicles hanging from the cliffs. It wasn't a roar of victory. It was a roar of judgment. Every wolf in the stands felt the vibration in their marrow. The weaker ones fell to their knees, their wolves forcing them into submission. Even Gabriel Sterling slumped into his seat, clutching his chest as his own wolf whined in terror. Tiffany looked at Alaric. The king was smiling. A dark, proud, terrifying smile. But then Elder Kalen stood up. He wasn't bowing. He was pointing a trembling, withered finger at the arena. "Abomination!" Kalen shrieked, his voice cutting through the awe. "She consumes the soul. She is not a spirit walker. She is a soul eater. Kill her, before she devours us all." The enforcers on the arena wall raised their rifles. Tiffany stood alone in the snow, her chest heaving as 100 laser sights dotted her silver fur. She had won the trial. But the war had just begun. The air in the arena was so still that the sound of 100 safety catches clicking off on the enforcers' rifles sounded like a cascade of falling dominoes. Tiffany stood frozen. The red laser dots danced across her silver fur like bloody confetti. She could feel the intent of the soldiers on the wall. They were terrified, and terrified men pulled triggers. Elder Kalen screamed again, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Fire, destroy the demon!" Bang! A single shot rang out. It wasn't aimed at Tiffany. High in the royal box, Alaric Thorne had moved faster than the eye could track. He had vaulted over the stone railing, dropping 50 feet into the arena below. He landed in the snow with a force that shook the mountain, throwing up a cloud of white powder. When the dust settled, the king stood between the spirit walker and the rifles. He wasn't shifting. He didn't need to. He stood in his human form, his arms spread wide, his violet eyes glowing with a nuclear intensity that outshone the sun. The bullet that had been fired lay flattened against an invisible barrier inches from his chest. It fell to the snow with a hiss. "The next man who touches a trigger," Alaric said, his voice deceptively low, yet amplified by the primal power, so that it echoed inside the skulls of everyone present, "dies along with his entire bloodline." The enforcers froze. Their wolves were whimpering inside them, forcing their human hands to lower the weapons. You do not shoot the king. It goes against biology. Elder Kalen gripped the edge of his stone throne. "Alaric, step aside. That thing just consumed a soul. It is a violation of the first laws." Alaric turned his back on the armed soldiers. He looked at Tiffany, who was trembling, the ethereal light of her fur pulsing erratically. He reached out a hand and placed it gently on her muzzle. "Calm," he whispered to her. "I am here." He turned back to the council, his face a mask of cold fury. "She did not consume a soul, Kalen," Alaric roared. "She consumed the corruption. She ate the rot inside a broken man. And that is why you are afraid, isn't it?" Alaric began to walk toward the council seats, the snow crunching under his boots. Tiffany, the massive spirit walker, padded silently behind him, her 3 tails weaving a hypnotic pattern in the air. "You aren't afraid she is a demon," Alaric shouted, pointing up at the trembling elders. "You are afraid because the spirit walkers were the only ones who could judge you." The silence that followed was damning. Alaric stopped directly in front of the Silver Creek box. Alpha Gabriel Sterling was pressed against the back wall, using Lydia as a human shield. "Gabriel Sterling," Alaric said. Tiffany stepped forward. She didn't attack. She simply looked at her former Alpha. Her silver eyes bored into him, and for the first time, Gabriel saw what he had thrown away. He saw the galaxy swirling in her gaze. The spirit walker opened her mouth. A sound came out, not a roar, but a voice. It was Tiffany's voice, but layered, echoing as if spoken by a legion. "You called me useless," Gabriel sobbed. I didn't know. Please." "You called me hollow." The spirit walker lowered her head until she was eye level with him. I am not hollow. I am the end of things. Tiffany lunged not to bite, but to breathe. She exhaled a cloud of silver mist over Gabriel and Lydia. They screamed, clawing at their faces. It didn't hurt physically, but mentally it was agony. The mist stripped away their shielding. It forced them to feel every ounce of pain they had inflicted on Tiffany for 10 years all at once. The starvation, the cold, the loneliness. Gabriel collapsed, curling into a ball, weeping uncontrollably. He wasn't dead, but his mind was broken by the weight of his own cruelty. He would live the rest of his days trapped in the nightmare he had created. Tiffany turned away from them. The justice was done. She looked at Alaric. The rage drained out of her, leaving only exhaustion. The massive spirit form flickered. "Shift," Alaric commanded softly. Tiffany closed her eyes. The light imploded. In a second, she was a girl again, standing shivering in the snow, wearing the tattered remains of her tunic. Alaric immediately wrapped his coat around her. He lifted her chin, forcing her to look at him. "It is finished," he said. He turned to the crowd. Thousands of wolves were watching, holding their breath. "The council calls her a soul-eater," Alaric announced, his voice ringing out across the peaks. "They want to kill her because she represents the truth they have hidden from. But I say, she is the future." He took Tiffany's hand and raised it high. "I, Alaric Thorn, king of the North High Alpha of the primal blood, claim Tiffany Anderson as my mate. I claim her as my queen, and I declare her the matriarch of the new era." He looked up at Elder Kalen, whose face had gone grey. "If the council wishes to challenge her." Alaric smiled a dark, predatory grin. "You may step into the arena now, but be warned, she is hungry." Kalen sank back into his chair. He signaled the enforcers to stand down. No one moved. The hierarchy had shattered. Tiffany looked out at the sea of faces. She saw the fear, yes, but in the eyes of the Omegas, the servants and the weak, she saw hope. She saw awe. She tightened her grip on Alaric's hand. They walked out of the arena together, leaving the broken body of the butcher and the weeping form of Alpha Gabriel in the snow behind them. As they reached the dark tunnel leading back to the lodge, Tiffany looked up at the king. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Everyone hates me." Alaric stopped. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "They don't hate you, Tiffany. They fear you. And eventually they will love you." He looked back at the snowy arena. "They called you useless. They called you nothing." He looked into her eyes, the violet and the silver clashing and merging. "Let them call you whatever they want," Alaric whispered, "because the rest of the world, they will just call you Majesty." Tiffany smiled, and for the first time in 22 years, the cold didn't bother her at all. And that is the story of how the useless girl brought the werewolf world to its knees. Tiffany Anderson went from scrubbing floors to becoming the most powerful creature in existence, a spirit walker who judges the souls of the wicked. Gabriel got exactly what he deserved, a lifetime of feeling the pain he caused others. It's a brutal poetic justice, isn't it? But the story isn't truly over. The council is still out there afraid of her power. Kalen won't stay quiet for long. Do you think Tiffany can change the world, or will the power corrupt her like it did the Alphas before her? If you loved this story, please smash that like button. It helps us so much. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next epic saga. And tell me in the comments if you were Tiffany, would you have spared Gabriel, or would you have finished him off? I'll be reading your answers. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.